The first thing. Now, I think most people incorporate some. You all put your hands up for the breathing gym. It's a thing of time. When I speak to groups, they all know what they should be doing, but they don't do it consistently. So if, for example, if they're redoing the end of the opener, then maybe there's no breathing that day, right? You're right into like the long tones and the chorale, and then go to the field. And I really think it's one of those things that, because kids will sometimes approach breathing as if it's like that thing you make us do like whenever we get a little bit more time. And so right even in there, it kind of gives them the wrong message about how important this really is to the success. And you know this, the really good groups in our activity, wherever it be, in the summer, in the fall, in the winter, those are the ones that are really paying attention. If you ever get a chance to, we're going to jump into another season, but if you ever get a chance to go and see Matt Harloff warm up the Carolina Crown, if you haven't seen that, you'll be amazed at how much time he spends on air. It's really, it's pretty incredible. And when you hear the way they sound, you start to get, there's a connection there. And I think, especially with younger kids, the more they understand about the breathing and the connection of the breathing, because I see sometimes that they'll do breathing and then they might do some singing, and then they don't always transfer the skills, and they certainly don't when they go to their horns. So that's important to talk about. So if you have, and it's going to be up to you when you do, we'll talk later about time management, but how you set up your time, like how much time are you giving for warm up? Is it consistent? Or is it 20 minutes one day and 40 the next day? So those are things you're going to have to kind of come to terms with. We all know as musicians that we had our first breakthrough as musicians when we had a routine, probably, right? When was that? Around college? Maybe in high school? And it changed our playing dramatically. And you also had a private lesson teacher, probably once a week or maybe more. And that's where it opened up. So you can't quite do it. You can't replicate the schedule of a college, and that's pretty much all you do for the day. But we can certainly try to be consistent with how we approach this and how much time you can give to it. But if you only do it every second rehearsal or every third rehearsal, I would encourage you to do it every rehearsal and just make time for it. Okay. This will help us too with it's kind of a long day and a long weekend. So would you mind if you just stood up for a second? We're just going to do a little bit here. I think for students, sometimes getting them to feel the actual sensation of a breath is really, really crucial. If you can just have access to a chair nearby you, and maybe even pull it into the aisle so you have a little space. I'm going to ask you to get on the front of the chair. Now I got this thing on my side, I better unhook it so I don't do some damage. See, the idea is you want to get it as far forward on the chair without falling off. And then have your arms just kind of hang over the side and hang your head down like a rag doll. So there's like no tension. So, and just let it hang there for a second. Don't hold your head up. All that's just got to come out. All that tension's got to come out. Now I want to just take some easy breaths, not deep breaths, but just take breaths in and just check out what's happening. What are you feeling? And where do you feel it? For most of us, you're feeling an expansion in your back that maybe you don't normally feel in an upright position. As you keep going and you take deeper breaths, you might feel your actual upper body is actually raising up because of the expansion level. So this is an excellent exercise. You can roll up slowly so you don't get dizzy. There you go. And that's a great one to start with kids because it kind of gets them to feel the expansion. And if you've never done that, you maybe never have felt that sensation of how all that kind of expands down there. So that's a really good one. So if you get a chance, that might be, and you don't have to do that one every day, but it might be nice early on if they had somewhere where they could sit or on an edge of a desk to kind of get that sensation. I talk, without getting, I know some people get really into the diaphragm and you know why I don't? Because it's really a muscle you can't control. How do we know that? Because we wake up every morning and you didn't have to do anything during your sleep and it still works. So it's kind of like an involuntary muscle. People go really in depth with this, and I don't. It's that little, I tell them it's like this little muscle. It's about shaped like this, and what happens involuntarily, it flattens and creates suction. That's your breath. That's what happens all night long when you're sleeping. You don't have to worry or practice that. That just happens. So for the people who go really in detail, it's almost kind of, it's a moot point, isn't it? But what kids need to know, and I know you guys do this because I know your programs, the breath has to be relaxed in. You know, we can't do that capping idea. We all talk about that. So, you know, even before I get to the breaths, I'll tell you one other thing I like to do, and you probably do something similar to this, and this comes right out of the breathing gym, is just get them in some kind of a tension position. Like I like them to scrunch up like this. Actually, we can stand and do this one. I'm sorry, got you back up and down. This will help us stay awake to all this breathing and standing up. So if you could just tighten up, get really tight, like a lot of constriction, shoulders up high, and sigh. Ah. And then shake your arms out. And it feels really good, doesn't it? It feels really good. Do that again. Tight, squeeze, lots of tension. And sigh. Ah. And then sometimes I get them to move their heads around. And then I want them to remember that relaxed state, because that relaxed state is where I want you need to be on your air. And we all talk about, you know, don't move your shoulders, don't do anything. I just try to get thinking about, I ask them, and some of you did it already, when you get up and you're tired or late at night, we yawn, right? Try to make yourself yawn or just do it on your own. Oh man, that feels so good, isn't it? Do a couple of those. Because you're not thinking about anything other than yawning. That's the perfect breath. That's the perfect mouth cavity. And now you just kind of make it do the thing we do. But I think the relaxation part is more important than all the other stuff we can talk about, because it puts their mind somewhere else a little bit on the breath, and then they do it naturally. Because we talk too much about breathing, they start to go, the last thing we want, right? Tension, right? Didn't really fill up. So, and the sound. Do you have kids that do this? Sometimes, you know, because they breathe through around their mouthpieces. But even when not, you'll hear, so like all that, you know, tight mouth cavity. So with a yawn, there's hardly anything there, right? There's a sound. Could you do that and try to make that same sound? And just let it out. Really relaxed. So that's how I would start with the breathing part. And then I don't really say even much about the exhalation. We do exercises, obviously, to develop breath control, other than the one word. I say control without tension. Control without tension. Try that. Take your breath in. Let it out. Control, no tension. You know, sometimes see the paper airplane idea, right? From breathing gym. Try that again. No capping the air, right? Some kids will do that. They'll go, right? I know there's some trumpet techniques that will encourage that. I don't buy it. I don't like it, because I think with young kids, they develop weird tendencies. So let's try that again. And we'll do the airplane this time. Here, air in. Awesome. Great. So some of those, so that might be something you like, and it's visual for the kids. They get a sense of the air direction. And I think that comes back to the breathing gym with, unfortunately, Sam passed away, but Pat and Patrick put that great program together. Okay, so you can have a seat. And then we get into some other things like resistance exercises. I like this one. I don't know if you do this one. You start like a regular breath that we just took, and then you take your hand up and you create like suction. It stops the air, and boy, talk about a sensation exercise. It's like the one you just did on the front of your chair. When you pull that hand away, that last bit of air that goes in, kids don't know that sensation. Here's what it looks like if you haven't done it. You let your air out. You go. And don't wait too long to put the thing up because you're just leaving that little bit of air you can take in. So go about halfway in your breath. I'll do it again. Air out. I'll go. Try that on your own. It's crazy, right? The sensation you get of how that fills up. That's a sensation kids don't know when they breathe. That in the front of the chair. So that I like that. Other resistance things, people putting their, you know how I feel about that one. You guys use that one? I mean, it again, it's like anything. If it works for you, if it makes sense for you pedagogically and you're getting some result from the kids and the lights are going on, use it. If it doesn't, maybe you move to the next thing, okay? This sun goddess is a thing I used to first learn all the way back in college, and actually Maynard's band used to do this back in the day. How do I know this? Because the guy that comes and spends time with my trumpet kids, Joe Masello, was one of his players on the Rocky albums and all that. And is that Joe Masello? And Maynard would do this thing. He'd get the band together, and they would. It's really simple. Like it just basically, you're breathing as you go like this. You go up here, and then initially you would go fast. As you exhale the air, right? And eventually, it's about controlling with no tension, and it's very meditative, right? And it gets slower and slower and slower. And I'm telling you, when you've done a few of those, you don't need coffee. You are good to go. Wide-eyed, functioning, brain working. Like they would do that right before they would go on and play, right? We don't have to do it right now, but that might be something to check out. I like to do 10 of them. So if I got like to perform, or if my mind's frazzled like it was before because I couldn't get my electronics to work yesterday, I should have gone and done a few of these because it's really calming because, that the breath that we take for granted. It's a beautiful thing that we do. It's really good for our bodies. I play in this casino band. It's about an hour from my house. And I'm usually tired when I do it because I teach during the day. And so I'm driving back at like midnight, 1 in the morning, and I'm not a young guy anymore. And I'm telling you, when I come home, I'm good to go. Because I've just been playing for 2.5 hours and breathing and working my mechanism. And the fact that you played, after you play high, well, I swear, some of that is your body. There's a thing that happens with oxygen that happens and energizes you. So the more we can tap in, those are great benefits. Okay. Then we vary the breath. We can use, the in for 4, out for 4, in for 2, out for 8, in for 1, out for 16. Vary those with different tempos, okay? Stagger breathing. I like to do that so early. I can never do it early enough. I want to do it even in my breathing exercises. I want to do it when we go to our mouthpieces. I want to do it when we sing as we get into the next slide. I want to establish that, and I want them to know what the rules are, right? I don't think enough groups work on that technique. And then you hear the sound and you don't hear the organ. You don't hear the sustain pedal. So I think the main things I get at with them, and I'm sure you do this, just awareness of whether it's a trio situation or their neighbors, sneaking in and sneaking out of the sound, but still get back to the level you were at before you took your breath. Because otherwise, if you notice that the volume does come down as they're sneaking in and out. But just an awareness. Kids are smart, but sometimes they're not aware of things, and that's where we come in as educators, to make them aware to do stuff like this. So that top one there is what you have in your hand, the one that is in yellow or orange. And I'm not going to get into the breathing gym, but that's a shortened version of it there if you want to take a snapshot of that. Or if you want to just contact me at the end, I have my email address up and I can send this stuff to you. Okay, so let's move to the next thing. And again, you're going to go, oh, so we got to breathe and sing? We're never going to get to the end of that closer that's new. And again, it's find a way to incorporate it so it doesn't take all day. I used to be in this same boat. My jazz band goes to a state competition where they have to sight read, right, every year. And they weren't particularly good at it, like 5, 6 years ago. And partly why they weren't good at it is I never had them read much, other than occasionally. So it was my problem. And then I made a concerted effort that every day, not some days, every day they would read. For me, I didn't know how I was going to do that initially, because in my mind, I thought a chart. How am I going to do this and still work on their stuff that they have to perform with? And a very bright colleague of mine said, take a chart. Once they're warmed up, 8 bars. That's it. Keep it in their folder. 8 bars, one time. You don't read it again. Next day, another 8. It was like, why didn't I think of that? So sometimes it's just, whatever you might have in your brain as far as what that thing is stopping you from doing, and it comes back to time management. Most of our issues where we don't do stuff comes back to time management. So if you can figure how to get around that, you can incorporate it. And I do it. And this is how I teach audiation. We're going to get into some of this stuff. The key one is the number one. Make sure what you just did with your breathing, whether that's 7 minutes, 5 minutes, you can, however you want to do it, they bring that skill. They take that breath, that sensation, what we just did, that relaxation into the singing. Now, a lot of kids don't like to sing. I don't know about you and how you do this. Some people use the harmonizer, and I use the good old Dr. Beat. And I set it on this. Can we all sing that to La? Any octave. La. So we talk about mouth cavity, we talk about jaw, but more just get them out of their shells, because you're going to get, because hey, I came to play the saxophone, I can't sing. And so we don't make a big deal about their singing other than just try to get any octave, take away whatever they're afraid of. Low, high, doesn't care, just try to match the note, and you'll have the kids that can't, but you keep at it. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. We'll do it in unison first. We'll do half note slurred, sing to La, half note slurred, we'll get up to the top octave, we'll come right back down, and then we'll just sit there. Okay, so we'll do it in unison the first time. Watching me. Beautiful. And your groups will sound just like that. So what did we do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. We're going around now. Okay, so 1 start. I'll cue each entrance. Ones. So half note slurred, ready? And. Hold the bottom note till we're all done. Okay, all right. And we hold our pitch fairly well. They might not. This is where this is beautiful. What I do is I run this through a wire, and it stands, you set your Dr. Beat behind the arc. It's back there, and the drum major does it, and she knows she goes on the tuner, or when she goes on the metronome. I'm telling you, it will transform your pitch. It will transform your pitch. I do this every day in class with my groups. So definitely a great tool. I know my groups are playing more in tune, and it's because of this. And notice we left it on, so there was a relative thing. You were relating notes to this, otherwise they float away, especially initially. Eventually, you can take the training wheel away, because that's what it is, right? You can take it away, but not probably initially. And you'll still have those kids, they'll struggle with it, but you encourage them. Don't make it feel like, oh, you can't participate because, you might not be getting it 100%. Okay, so all that stuff's good. You could talk about mouth position, jaw position, listen and match, we did that. However, and I'm glad you brought that up, you're moving forward with it and having them hear different things. The stagger breathing comes from we might even started with that, with our breathing. We bring it into here, and we start talking about balance and blend. I talk a lot about contribution. Are you matching contribution with your people around you, right? So, and that's a big one, an awareness of their trios. All right, so we're going to spend some time here. I think you might like this. I'm kind of one of those people, I love getting new warm-ups. I like checking out different things, and I don't like to always play the same thing for warm-up. So now we've finished our breathing, we've finished our singing, and now it's actually time to play. People like to do different things. I like to play my mouthpiece, for example. Some people like to do that. Some people like to go straight to the horns. I think everyone's in agreement. There's going to be some kind of long tone. But again, let's go back to what we said. That all has to transfer. If you don't transfer the skill from what you did with the breathing to the singing to what we're about to do on the horn, you have to wonder, why are we doing that? So you have to tell them to make those connections. They may not on their own. They pick up a horn, that's a whole different animal. Now there's a neck strap and a mouthpiece and a this and a that and a, it's not like, oh, I was just focusing on singing before, right? So help them make those connections. I'm going to come back to the other boxes. Those are basic things that you would see in a warm-up. But what I want you to take a look at is this actual warm-up, because I think it's kind of cool. And what's mostly cool about it, it's free. So how cool is that? This guy's a good guy. His name is John McAllister. I've been in communication with him and setting this program up. He was very excited that I would be sharing it with you all. If you get onto the main site, johnmcallistermusic.com, I don't know if you can see it, but the free resources are right there. We'll get you into a whole bunch of stuff. But it's beyond just free. Check out some of what it does. First of all, if you got a beginner band, there you go. He's got a complete set, score, and parts. Just print it out. If you got a young ensemble, a little older, maybe they're doing a few more new skills, there it is. Check it out. I do this one for my symphonic band. They already read it one day. Not the entire thing, but they read through it. Check this one out. This is called Comprehensive Ensemble Warm-Ups. Guess what comes with it? So long tones, kids get bored with them, right? What if they had this link or they knew this site and they could play their long tones along with this? Maybe it's an evaluation if you're in a school setting, right? For young kids, just on the horn, you want to start getting them into this world. So you can see the note there. It says, note the long tone sequences work with the cinematic long tones. And for visual learners, these kids are seeing, that's cool, right? So it's not just that F. I'll say, whoa, there's a whole thing happening here. Audio visual stimulation for them. Okay, so that might be interesting. And again, it might not be something you want to do with the full line. Maybe it's something they go home and work with. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And do I sound like the musicians? Am I matching sounds? Am I in tune with them? Check this one out, B flat, basic B flat. They just learned it. Maybe even beginners. Check this one out. Shows them the pitches they're on. And you can see it's in different keys. He has different warm-ups here. And these are all complete sets. They're score and parts. Band basics. You got if for marching band, they have one for marching band. I believe this is the one. Let me pull it up if I'm not mistaken. There are your long tones, and I think he's got like a crown tuning sequence in this one. If I'm not there, yeah, there it is. See it? You know that thing that Matt does with the horn lines, where de, sol, la, ti, do, and then just the altos will sustain and check their pitch, and then you'll bring it back in. The next group, sol, la, ti, do, just the trumpets play or the baritones. There it is. I mean, it's pretty simple, but there it is in one place. It would be on this is the conductor's score, and that would be, they would have their own parts for that if that interests you. That's what I like to do with these. I find things that would be beneficial for my group, and I pick and choose. You can see the articulation and the level of rhythm is certainly more advanced in this one, right? So again, if that doesn't work for your kids, then there's ones that would be a better fit for them. Come out of that. So that goes on. So definitely check that out. Pretty good for free, huh? And he's really good. Like if you email him back and forth and say, what do you think about if you did something like, he goes, oh yeah, that would be awesome. Because I think he's a young composer and he's trying to get his stuff out there. So it's one of those deals, but for like warming up, are you kidding me? Like he understands it. He understands all the parts, the articulation, the flow studies, it's all in there. So it might take you a little while to go through it because it's pretty comprehensive, but definitely worth checking it out. As again, we mentioned, all of these things are things that you would see in your warm-up. But again, especially early in the season, connection of concept to concept to concept. I think that's really, really important. The long tones, relaxed sound, open mouth, just getting that kind of sound. And here's something else. And I know I keep talking about Matt Harloff, and part of that is because we used to teach together when we were at the cadets many years back. But he's a stickler for what we call timbral matching. Right down to when he does his auditions, which should be coming up, right? Pretty soon, a couple of months or so. What happens is he already knows what he wants the trumpet to sound like if you're going to be in that horn line. So when the kids come, that's the first thing he does. He hears them. Like, do they have like the raw goods of what that timbre I'm looking for? So he's already got a sound in his head. And then from there, he kind of evolves that. So the kids are making the sound the same way, all of the technique that they do, which is a lot. But that sound that you hear and that resonance and the sonority that they get, I really believe he spends more time on those kids matching. So you sound like you sound like you sound like you. Not just in tune, but tone. In tune, in tone. I really think you will change the way your group sounds. If kids start making the sounds the same way, breathe together, play together. Donnie Van Doren, simple, breathe, da. And then you wonder why when you listen to those guys play, how they enunciate sound, is because the kids know that air starts the sound. It's not the tongue. They know that concept. And I'm not sure every group knows that. Why don't they know it? Because people aren't telling them that. So, don't expect the kids to understand some of these concepts. One other thing I didn't show you. I jumped out too soon. Let me go back. So right down at the bottom, man, let's go to the one I did. I did the symphonic warm-up with, I'm back, with my kids. And you get near the end, you come out, you can see the variety of the exercises. And on the day one, we did some of the long tones. We actually tried it with the symphonic. They thought that was funny, man. But we had a nice setup in the room with speakers. But when you get to the end, just bear with me because it's the score, you get to this, which I like. And these are pretty nice. And they're short, right? It's got a nice little chorale, a couple of things here, friendly keys, chorale 2, and percussion is playing, and chorale 3. So pretty nice. Pick the one you like. Maybe vary them. They're short, won't take you long to learn them. And something that, keep the kids a little interested with it. So that's cool, and I like that. All right, so let's come out of there. Moving and playing. Oh boy, here we go. Right? You've heard about the groups that are like the masters of the parking lot, the masters of the arc, sounding amazing, falling in love with themselves, standing in the arc. Speaking of arc, I think there are benefits to it. I don't know how you feel. Like a couple things I like to do. How many of you warm up in the circle? I like the circle. In the arc or circle, I like to mix them. I like to mix the instrumentation. So brass, woodwind, whatever. And it's not like you're trying to get the flute to play as loud as the trumpet or the baritone, but it's presence. I talk about presence as it relates to contribution. Presence. Do you have presence that can hear your sound inside a baritone or a mellophone or a trumpet? So those are things that could help them. But anyways, so you've done the initial part. You've done your breathing, your singing, your long tones, and now you're feeling. This is another thing, time-wise. I knew I should be moving some before we actually hit the field, but I didn't know how to do it. And I knew I didn't want to do it on the long tones because that's where you're just getting everything moving and whatever. But as soon as I, got into my slurs or maybe articulation, I'm moving. I'm putting them in a block or some form where I am going to move. But before that, and we keep talking about the transferring of skills. So somewhere, hopefully, maybe they start the rehearsal in a marching block. Is that what you all do? Is that the first thing they normally do? Did they march or would they play right away? Varies. Okay. If you do somewhere where they do their marching block, they're being taught technique, right? About how we move, how we stand. You need to, because when they're with them, have you noticed this? They're like this. They come to you, they're like this. You notice that? Maybe not. I notice it. So unless you transfer that, you can remember, stand like this, right? They'll stand like this initially, and then they start doing this because at the visual rehearsal, they wouldn't let them away with that. But sometimes we let them away with that because we're distracted with sounds and tuning and whatever, Dr. Beat. So if you have maybe some text, maybe you give them that job. They're going around, they're checking hand position, posture, maintaining foot position. Be really detail-oriented because that will help them with their expectation of what they do when they come to you. So if you get all that in place, now you're ready to move. I don't like to move on the long tones. Some people do. But I like to move on anything else. So the initial long tones I'm talking about. You can do a tuning sequence on the move. Actually, that's probably a good thing to do. And to see how well they're controlling their sound. We all know about the body and the suspension and how that works with the good foot technique to create a constant sound where you're not hearing that. So have them work on that. But you need to do a bit of that. The marching band in my school, I went and I listened to them. Again, sounded really good in the arc and then not so good on the field because that's the skill they do in marching band. They move and play. And the kids are not doing enough of the skill, right? So they're not particularly good at it. They will get better. Okay, so that definitely move and play. Referring to the movement technique, transferring skills from breathing and singing, we talked about that. And however you do that, is it across the floor? Is it actually on the football field? I like the football field because you got your lines and they can check. If you can get the visual people, sometimes they don't like to come, right? They like to just hang out because they did their time. But get them there. Text with our group, tech, music, and visual. They're not specialized, right? It's kind of counterproductive almost, right? Kids need a lot of help. So sometimes it's their feet. Actually, most times it's their feet. And sometimes it's just their air or they're not standing properly or whatever. So definitely I would check into that. Tuning sequences, chorale, excerpts from the show. It's another thing that you probably see Matt do a lot. He does a lot of show excerpts, right, before the show. Plays a lot of parts. And he has a thing he calls daily hits. And they're usually the hardest thing in his book, hardest thing in his show. And he does it every day. Now, what we see on the videos, that's like, the cooking show when they already have the casserole baked. They don't show you when it's first going in the oven and all that stuff. And I can tell you, and you do the same, he'll take stuff down tempo. He'll break rhythmic stuff down to one-E, one-E-N, one E and a, one E and a two, one E and a two and. If you ever see him, he's meticulous. Like he will literally play one note of the rhythm at a time and add in. And if he doesn't like what he hears, he goes, nope. And they go one E, nope. One E, nope. One E, yes. One E and, right? He literally goes through it that way if you ever see it early on. So meticulous. And then working sections of the show. As far as the ensemble, do you have designated people that's their job? They're the ones that go up top? Or does it vary? Different people? I think it really comes down to when you evaluate it, how do you think the kids are moving, right? And how do you think the kids are playing? Like if I go and I see, like I work with a group in Houston, Westfield High School, they move and play pretty well. So I might say, if they're comfortable with that, can we maybe do something together and go right into like a warm-up situation? Now, if I went to another group and they had all issues with the way they moved and their technique, I would say probably I would give them a little bit more time on their own. And similarly, if the winds were struggling and these concepts and basic fundamentals, I would probably keep them separate and just really focus in on what it is about those two. Because if you don't address the visual thing, it's going to affect the music thing. We know that. How much metronome do you use in the rehearsals? A lot? Fair amount? Yeah. I mean, I'm a big metronome user. I know some of my colleagues aren't, but I really think that the thing with the metronome, it's teaching the speed of the music. It's teaching sense memory of the speed of the music. If it goes beyond that to other things, then maybe it's overused. And at some point, we all know that the kids need to know it's a listening. You don't have this now, right? But you have this. So once they kind of sense memory, hands, feet, then the listening part. And you can troubleshoot for them and say, you should already know where we're going to have ensemble issues. Do you know where they're going to be? They're going to be side one to side two relationships, sounds coming from the back, after a sound from the front. And if they could start to troubleshoot, they could start figuring out, ahead of time, where might I have trouble? Otherwise, they're going to just bump into it, and then you're going to have to stop. And how many of you do, before you even really get into the thing, do some of those, what you can listen, what you can't, you do some of that with them? That's great. Those are great things, because that will really solidify the concepts of you can't listen forward and you can't listen across. That's really, really good stuff for you, especially for young kids. And it would help them become a self-cleaning oven a bit, because they'll start to troubleshoot that stuff, and they'll know, here's that part. Here's that part. I got to really listen, or I got to really anticipate, or whatever. So I think the metronome is definitely a good place to be. And I mean, everyone knows it's gonna go at the back. Focus on the feet. Keep using Carolina Crown, but they're big on it. They got some folks that have been there a long time, that have done it a long time. And they have this group that they like to bring in, usually around the start of August. And it's like, here comes the meat now. And really what all they do is they're like relentless on the kids' feet. And when you hear Crown by the start of August, they're pretty damn good. And then here comes the meat now. Now we're going to fix your feet. So when you hear them at championship, it's like, what? Like it's a clarity that I don't think a lot of people get in the summer activity. Some of the writing, yeah. But a lot of it's the performance. They just get people that are out on the field. If you're like my band, it drives me crazy. We call them the sideline huggers. You get those texts? I think it's not like they're bad people. I just don't think they know their job. We assume, as the lead people with our groups, that people come in and know how to tech. They don't. They're band directors. They're working on conducting with a baton, and they might not know. They might be great people with lots of knowledge, but unless someone says, we need you to look at feet today, Make sure their feet are going down together and in a way that we address in our visual block, not just willy-nilly. Where are their upper body facings? You know, are they correct? What are their spacings like? So again, if you're a tech, you're a music tech and you're a visual tech. We don't have personnel to have, oh, you're the specialist and you're the upper brass, you know, above G and above. That's all you do. No, we can't do that. So just let them know what they do. Short, succinct comments, we know this because we've done it, but they don't. You can't give an entire dialogue when the people are going by you. Get your feet in time. Upper body. You know that. That's what kids react to in time. Balancing electronics or percussion or track. That's a big one. We know it is. And again, I feel the pain because I felt it yesterday when my electronics weren't ready to go. And I was stressing for 2 hours. Wes, you can back me up on that. But now that we have the advantage of being able to get up in the stands with an iPad and control this stuff virtually, just make sure someone has an ear for that it's something that seems in balance, it's enhancing what we do. You know from the analysis part on the sheet, you don't really get a lot of credit or any, for that matter, for percussion, but they can be detrimental on that sheet. On the other sheets, yes, you'll get credit and things like that. So make sure that's dialed in. The one thing I'll say, though, about the electronics is, and this comes back to the reality of budget, like what are you using? What are your speakers like? What are your microphones like? And do you have a board that has capability to really dial in fidelity and EQ, so you can actually get a trumpet to sound like a characteristic sound, or you get that flute that has you got to reverb too soon and you didn't actually get a true flute sound, so those are things that if you have someone that knows what they're doing, that can be tremendously helpful, and then you're going to get credit. But sometimes when we hear sounds that we're just happy the thing turned on and someone got amplified. It's got to be more than that, right? I know, I have been there. I've been there, especially with the wireless stuff, right? We're just happy sometimes it goes on, right? So see if we can do better with that. Let's talk a little bit about, so now you're on the field, now you've got some stuff going, and this may be even further down the road. And it's the same thing we do with our bands when you're doing wind band, symphonic band. You've got that part with that texture with 4 ideas in it, right? You know the one? Can you think of the piece? Because the kids are just going to play what it says, forte. They're going to do that. They don't understand. So your job is to say, what's the primary thing? What's the primary voice inside this texture of 4 ideas? In fact, let's just hear that. Who has it, first of all? And then they point or whatever. Okay, good. So let's just hear that. Because sometimes they don't even know that. They don't hear it, or they certainly don't know it's the primary, right? So identify that. Secondary, tertiary. And it goes on from there. Now, how do you go about doing that? Is it strictly dynamic? Yeah, some of it is, right? Some of it's contour. Now we put it on the floor. What else is going to impact that? Give me another variable. Now you're on the floor. You can sit in the chairs and identify who's got primary, secondary, tertiary. Put it on the floor. What else impacts here? Staging. Huge. And then you want to pull your hair out because the primary is at the back. Come on. Get those wireless out. Try to make them sound like the instrument. Right? So that's hard to do, but that's your work. Depending on the repertoire you choose, that's your challenge. Can you hear that? And then the additional voice of the percussion or mallet station with main stage, whatever you're doing, just make it another color. Think of it that way. Have the kids think of it that way. Just like the instruments create colors, the electronic create colors. And it's really cool, and I really like it, and I give credit when an electronic color creates a new color with an acoustic instrument. That's a beautiful thing. That's a tribute to our activity, right? Because, you know, some places all you get is acoustic sound. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fabulous. But we are in a world where we can have sound reinforcement and amplification. Take advantage of that. Take advantage of it in an artistic way, right? And that starts from your planning, obviously, and that type of thing. And we jumped the gun a little bit, but the clarity and the EQ and the fidelity, that's a big one. That's your equipment. We're not going to say it's not. It's your speaker. It's your microphones. It's your board. So when you have a fundraiser, you can't go out and just we're gonna get line array speakers and we're gonna just do whatever everyone's doing. No, you probably can't afford that. So maybe you start with mics. Maybe you start with a speaker upgrade or a board. I upgraded our board, so it has more capabilities. You can do more things. So you pick your thing. Remember, you're in this for a while, right? You're not old like me, so you're going to be doing this a while. So look at it that way. It's an investment over time. Rehearsal techniques. First of all, maybe before we get to this, are there any other things as far as the ensemble that either you're experiencing or you're having issues with? Now, this is like you've got everything out on the field now, right? Or on the floor, and you're working it. Are there any other things in there specific to ensemble that we kind of just glossed over that you want to bring up or give you trouble? Pretty good? Okay, let's move on then. Okay, rehearsal techniques. I think the number one is, anyone recognize that app on the side? Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, not everyone does that. That's a band app. If you don't have it, I recommend getting it so all the kids have a place where they're getting their information. I know some people do it on Facebook or however, but it's an organizing tool. I don't know about you all, but the high school, I don't work so much with the marching band right now, but they come from 5 different schools that are all part of one high school, but they're like, some of them are 4 miles away from each other, and those kids will never see each other until they graduate. So the kids come together and create the ensemble. So we have to have something like that. We don't see them all in one school or in one class. They're from all over the place in the city. So having a band app where they have every bit of information that they know is crucial. Time is that's the biggest bugaboo. We said it from the start, right? The time to sing, the time to breathe, the time to transfer skills, the time to move and play. It's all going to come down to how you can manage that in your schedule. And I would suggest to you, the bands that are really doing this well have figured this out. And the bands that are struggling or inconsistent are inconsistent with how they schedule and how they manage their time. We all know the importance of it. Don't we teach that to our kids? They have the day planners and the whole thing. But yet, there's reasons why we're not consistent, because life happens when you're doing this activity, right? Stuff happens. And you had a great plan, and then now you got to go to something else because something happened that day. And there's a parade, or there's whatever. But the more you can try to stay to that thing and commit to that time and how you go about what it is you do, you're going to have better success. Communicate with other staff and leadership. Sometimes we like to go into our own pockets, right? We like to go into our own lanes, and that's fine. Like we talked about earlier, if you have a woodwind specialist, a brass specialist, electronic specialist, they should spend time with the kids. But sometimes we need to come together and share. And the apps are helpful for that, but just like have a little meeting here and there. I know we do this, but the more we kind of stay on that same page, I think that's helpful. And the leadership as well. The kids are in charge of disseminating information. I know you know stuff about the shared facility, and sometimes there might not be a shared facility, right? How many of you are in that boat? There's not a shared facility. It's one thing, or do you have that? Like, do you have to carve out that space with another organization or sports, and how difficult is that? Well, I do know there has been a trend for more band and arts things to be getting that phys ed credit, which is a great thing. I mean, we all have to get physicals, you know, we all have to do that. So why not? I mean, it makes sense. And if that can be incorporated into your day, now you've got something. Awesome. I know you do this, but if you don't, make sure that the kids are part of the goal setting that you make. Sometimes we make goals, but there are our goals. And the more you include them in that, just make sure they're realistic. But they like to be part of that plan, and they'll step up. We already have great kids anyways. But if you start including them and giving them part ownership in what it is, this thing you're trying to do, you'll see them really flourish. This is a tough one, being consistent with rehearsal etiquette, isn't it? Especially when at the start, when you're trying to say what it is, what are we going to look like when we're rehearsing? What do we sound like when we're rehearsing? Because there's a lot of parts to that, right? How do we stand when we're rehearsing? When you're not playing, how do you stand? Pleasure being here with you. I wish you the best of luck with your seasons coming up. And go have some oysters. Thank you.